The unexpected visitor. Ethan Carter was used to silence. His small cabin stood alone in the mountains, far from the noise of the city. No neighbors, no distractions, just him, his books, and his telescope. He liked it that way. Tonight, the sky was clear, filled with stars. Ethan sat on his porch, sipping hot coffee, watching the night sky. He had always been fascinated by space. As a former exobiologist, he had spent years studying alien life, but never found any real proof. That changed in an instant. A loud explosion tore through the sky, followed by a blazing streak of fire. Something was falling fast, heading straight for the forest behind his cabin. What the hell? Ethan barely had time to react before the object crashed into the trees, shaking the ground. Smoke and sparks rose from the impact site. Ethan's heart pounded. A meteor. A crashed satellite. He grabbed a flashlight and his jacket, then ran toward the crash. The forest was dark, the air thick with the smell of burnt metal and ozone. Pushing through the trees, he reached the crash site and stopped in shock. It wasn't a meteor. It wasn't a satellite. It was a ship. Sleek and silver, the craft was no bigger than a car, but unlike anything he had ever seen. It pulsed with faint blue lights, struggling to stay active. The hull was cracked, wires sparking. Then he saw her. A figure lay on the ground near the ship, barely moving. A woman, but not human. Her skin was smooth and metallic blue, glowing faintly under the moonlight. Her hair was silver white, flowing over her shoulders. She wore a skin-tight bodysuit with strange symbols glowing on her chest. Ethan hesitated. Was she alive? Dangerous. She groaned softly, her voice melodic yet weak. Without thinking, Ethan rushed forward and knelt beside her. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes fluttering open. They were not human eyes. They were golden, glowing, filled with intelligence and pain. She grabbed his wrist weakly, her fingers cold against his skin. "You are human," she whispered, her voice soft but desperate. Ethan swallowed hard. "Yeah. And you're not." Her lips parted slightly, struggling to speak. "Help. Me." Then she collapsed into his arms. Ethan didn't have time to think. He scooped her up, surprised by how light she was despite her height. Her skin was cool, almost like polished metal, but she was warm underneath, alive. His mind screamed a million questions, but one thing was clear. She needed help. Carefully, he carried her back to his cabin. Inside, Ethan laid her on the couch, covering her with a blanket. She didn't wake up. Her breathing was uneven. Was she injured? Was her biology even the same as his? He took a deep breath. Think, Ethan. Her suit had no visible wounds or blood, but her arm was burned, the fabric torn. Carefully, he reached out to touch her wrist. Her skin shimmered slightly under his fingers, almost like liquid metal. Then her wrist device beeped, a small holographic screen flickering to life. Ethan jumped back as glowing alien symbols appeared. The symbols shifted, transforming into English words. Oxygen levels stable. Energy low. Medical attention needed. Ethan's breath caught. She had a translator. Before he could react, she stirred, her eyes fluttering open again. For a moment, she just stared at him. Then she lifted her hand and pressed a glowing symbol on her wrist device. The air shimmered, and suddenly, her voice was perfectly clear. "I am Zyra. I need your help." Ethan's throat went dry. "Help with what?" She hesitated, then whispered, "I need your knowledge." Before he could ask more, she fell unconscious again. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, staring at the strange, beautiful alien on his couch. What the hell had he just gotten himself into? Strange questions, and an even stranger request. Ethan barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the crash, the alien ship, and most of all, her. Zyra. She lay motionless on his couch, her breathing slow but steady. He had wrapped her in a blanket, though he doubted she needed it. Her metallic blue skin glowed faintly under the dim light of the fireplace. The strange symbols on her bodysuit flickered from time to time, as if responding to something unseen. Ethan sat in his chair, watching her, trying to make sense of everything. An actual alien in his cabin. Not just any alien, one that spoke English, or at least had the technology to translate instantly. His mind raced with questions. Where was she from? Why was she here? And most importantly, what did she mean by "I need your knowledge"? His thoughts were interrupted when she suddenly stirred. A soft hum escaped her lips, her body shifting slightly beneath the blanket. Then her golden eyes snapped open, glowing like molten metal. Ethan tensed. What if she panicked? What if she thought he was a threat? But instead of fear, her gaze was filled with calm curiosity. Her lips parted slightly as she whispered, "Human." Ethan swallowed. Yeah, you're awake." She slowly sat up, wincing. "Where am I?" "My cabin," he said cautiously. "You crashed outside. I brought you here." Her gaze flickered toward the wooden walls, the fireplace, the bookshelves. Her fingers brushed against the fabric of the couch, as if testing the texture. "This is your dwelling." "Yeah. I live alone out here." She exhaled softly, almost in relief. "Good. No witnesses." Ethan stiffened. No witnesses? What the hell did that mean? Before he could respond, she placed a hand on her wrist device. The air shimmered around her, and suddenly a series of holographic screens appeared, displaying alien text and strange diagrams. She studied them for a moment before nodding to herself. "My ship is damaged. Communications are down. I will not be able to call for assistance until repairs are made." Ethan frowned. "And how exactly do you plan to fix an alien spaceship in the middle of nowhere?" She tilted her head slightly. "I will find a way. But first, I must complete my mission." Ethan leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Mission?" Zira met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "I was sent to study your species," she said finally. Ethan felt his stomach drop. "Study us?" "As in, an experiment." She blinked. "Not exactly. My people have studied thousands of life forms across the galaxy. We have gathered knowledge on biology, evolution, intelligence, but one thing still eludes us." She leaned closer, her golden eyes burning into his. "Human reproduction." Ethan choked on his own spit. "Excuse me, Waket." Zira didn't blink. "Human reproduction. It is still a mystery to my species. Our records contain conflicting information. I was sent to learn more." Ethan rubbed his face. "You mean like how it works?" She nodded. "Yes. Not just the biological process, but the social and emotional aspects. I must understand the full experience." Ethan felt like his brain had short-circuited. An alien had crash-landed in his backyard, and now she wanted a lesson on human reproduction. This had to be some kind of joke. "Look, I think you've got the wrong guy," he said. "I'm not exactly a teacher when it comes to that." Zira frowned slightly. "Are you not a biological expert?" "Exobiologist, yeah," he admitted. "I study alien life. Not." He gestured vaguely between them. "This." She seemed to consider that for a moment. "Then perhaps you are exactly the right person." Ethan groaned. "I don't think you understand what you're asking." Zira tilted her head. "Then explain." Ethan hesitated. How the hell was he supposed to explain romance, attraction, relationships, and everything else that went along with reproduction to an alien? "Okay, let me put it this way," he said, rubbing his temples. "Humans don't just reproduce for the sake of reproduction. There's more to it than that." Zira nodded. "Yes, this is what I must learn. My species lost natural reproduction a long time ago. We have relied on cloning for generations. We have forgotten what it means to form bonds, to create new life through natural means." Ethan's eyes widened. "Wait, you're saying your whole species can't reproduce naturally anymore?" She nodded. "Yes, And if we do not find a way to restore it, we will die out. Ethan was silent. He had expected many things from an alien encounter, a hostile invasion, a government cover-up, even some kind of war. But not this. Not an alien woman desperately trying to save her species by learning the lost art of love and reproduction. Zara took a slow breath. That is why I need your help, Ethan Carter. Not just as a scientist, but as a human. Ethan stared at her, feeling a mix of shock, disbelief, and something else he couldn't quite name. This was crazy, insane. And yet, somewhere deep inside, he felt a strange pull. A challenge. An opportunity. Something far bigger than himself. After a long pause, he exhaled. All right, Zara. If you really want to understand human reproduction, I guess we better start with Lesson 1. Zara's lips curved slightly in something that almost resembled a smile. Lesson 1, she repeated softly. I am ready. Ethan wasn't sure he was, but there was no turning back now. The lesson begins, but it's not what he expected. Ethan sat across from Zara at his small wooden table, still trying to wrap his head around the situation. An alien woman, no, a scientist from another species, was sitting in his cabin, watching him with intense golden eyes, waiting for him to teach her about human reproduction. The whole thing felt like some kind of fever dream. He cleared his throat. Okay, so, well, how do I even start? Zara tilted her head slightly. Begin with the basics. Ethan took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. All right. Well, humans don't just reproduce for the sake of survival. It's usually connected to emotions, relationships, and, he hesitated, intimacy. Zara nodded as if she were processing his words like data in a computer. I see. Your species links reproductive behavior with emotional bonds. This is different from many life forms I have studied. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You've studied other species. Yes, some reproduce purely through biological instinct. Others lay eggs. Some use external fertilization. Many do not form lasting bonds. She paused. But humans, your species is unique. You do not just mate. You form attachments, create families, love, attraction, loyalty. These factors are not necessary for reproduction, yet they define your entire system of pairing. Ethan exhaled. Yeah, it's complicated. Zara leaned forward slightly. Then I must experience it. Ethan choked on his coffee. Wait, what yet? Zara's expression remained calm. For accurate research, I must understand it firsthand. I require a human subject to engage in these experiences with me. Ethan coughed, struggling to find words. Look, you don't just ask someone to. He stopped himself. It's not that simple. Zara frowned slightly. Explain. Ethan leaned back, rubbing his forehead. How the hell do you explain dating to an alien scientist? Humans don't just decide to be together for reproduction, he said slowly. It usually starts with attraction, physical, emotional, or both. Then there's dating, spending time together, learning about each other, trust building, and sometimes, love. Zara studied him closely, then nodded. Very well. Then we shall begin with this dating process. Ethan blinked. Wait. What? You will be my test subject, Zara said simply. You will take me on dates, allow me to observe human emotional bonding in action, and engage in this trust building you mentioned. Ethan almost laughed in disbelief. You seriously want me to date you? As a scientific experiment? Zara gave a small nod. Correct. Ethan stared at her, unsure if this was the weirdest or most intriguing situation he had ever been in. You realize dating isn't just a series of steps, right? He said. It's about feelings, chemistry. It's unpredictable. Zara's golden eyes gleamed. Then that makes it an even more valuable experiment. Ethan sighed. You really won't take no for an answer, will you? No. He groaned, rubbing his face. What was he even doing? But deep down, a part of him was curious. An alien scientist wanted to learn not just about human reproduction, but about the emotions behind it. This wasn't just another biology lesson. This was first contact with an intelligent species on the most intimate level possible. And for some reason, he couldn't say no. "Fine," Ethan muttered. "I'll teach you. But we do this my way." Zura's lips curved slightly in what might have been a smirk. "Understood. What is the first step?" Ethan thought for a moment. "We start with something simple. The first date and the first surprise." An hour later, Ethan stood in his small kitchen, cooking dinner while Zura observed with quiet fascination. "Food preparation is an essential part of human bonding," she asked. "Sort of," Ethan said, chopping vegetables. "Sharing a meal is a big part of dating. It gives people a chance to talk and connect." Zura studied the ingredients. "Your species consumes organic matter to sustain life." "Yeah. What do you eat?" She hesitated, then pressed a button on her wrist device. A small glowing capsule ejected from a hidden compartment on her suit. "This contains my necessary nutrients," she explained. "One capsule provides enough sustenance for a full cycle." Ethan frowned. "So you don't eat actual food?" "Not in the way you do," she admitted. "But I am willing to try." Ethan smirked. "All right, but if you spit it out, I'm not taking it personally." Zura gave him a curious look. "Human digestion is vastly different from mine, but my body can analyze foreign substances and adapt." "Well, let's see if you can adapt to spaghetti." 30 minutes later, Zura sat at the table, studying the plate of food in front of her. Ethan watched as she hesitantly picked up a fork, twirling the spaghetti around it as he had shown her. She brought it to her lips, paused, then took a small bite. The moment the flavor hit her tongue, her golden eyes widened sharply. Ethan chuckled. "Good." She swallowed, looking genuinely stunned. "This is unlike anything I have experienced." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "So, you like it?" She took another bite, this time quicker. "It is stimulating." Ethan laughed. "Yeah, welcome to human cuisine." For the first time since she arrived, Zura looked surprised, as if she had just discovered something completely new. Ethan leaned forward. "See, dating isn't just about reproduction. It's about experiencing things together, making memories." Zura considered this, nodding slowly. "Fascinating. I had not anticipated this level of sensory engagement." She looked at Ethan with something different in her gaze now. Not just scientific curiosity, but genuine interest. And Ethan, despite knowing this was all just an experiment for her, felt something stir inside him too. Maybe this wasn't such a bad idea after all. The hidden threat. As Ethan and Zura shared their meal, a shadowy figure observed them from the trees outside the cabin. A sleek black drone hovered silently, its red sensors scanning the area. Its data was transmitted instantly to a dark, towering spaceship hidden in Earth's orbit. Inside, a reptilian figure watched the live feed with cold, narrowed eyes. "Target located," it hissed. "The Valari scientist is not alone." Another alien, clad in black armor, stepped forward. "The human will interfere." The leader's eyes gleamed. "Then eliminate him." The alien hunters and the truth about Zura. Ethan had no idea he was being watched. Inside his cabin, he leaned back in his chair, watching Zura as she slowly finished her meal. Her expression was thoughtful, her golden eyes flickering with something new, not just curiosity, but genuine intrigue. "This experience was unexpected," she admitted, setting her fork down. Ethan smirked. "Told you food was important." Zura studied him carefully. "It is not just the sustenance. It is the act of sharing. The conversation. The emotions that come with it." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You're catching on fast." She exhaled softly. "I must." Her tone was different now, less clinical, more personal. Ethan noticed the way her fingers tensed slightly, as if she was holding something back. Finally, he asked, "Zyra, why are you really here?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she tapped her wrist device. A holographic image appeared, a grand futuristic city, floating above a planet covered in swirling clouds. "This is Valor Prime," she said quietly. Ethan stared at the image. It was beautiful, unlike anything he had ever seen. But something about it felt wrong. The city looked empty, like a civilization trapped in a frozen moment. "Our species was once vast," Zyra continued. "Thousands of years ago, we perfected cloning. It was efficient, controlled. We eliminated disease, genetic flaws, biological weaknesses." She clenched her fist. "But over time, we lost something. Natural reproduction faded. We forgot how to create life in the way nature intended. Now, our numbers are dwindling. Our clones degrade with each generation. We are dying." Ethan leaned forward. "So you came here to learn how to fix that?" Zyra nodded. "We have gathered data on many species, but humans are unique. You do not reproduce out of necessity alone. You form connections, you build relationships, and these bonds create something stronger than biology alone." Ethan exhaled. "So you think human reproduction could save your people?" "I do not know," Zyra admitted, "but it may hold the key." Ethan was silent for a moment, letting the weight of her words sink in. Then he asked the question that had been gnawing at him. "If your people sent you here for this mission, why were you alone? Why didn't you land somewhere safer?" Zyra's jaw tightened. "Because I was being hunted." A sharp beep suddenly echoed from her wrist device. Zyra's eyes widened. "They found me." Attack on the cabin. A high-pitched hum filled the air. Ethan barely had time to react before his cabin windows shattered. A black drone burst inside, red sensors glowing like demonic eyes. "GED-1," Ethan yelled. Zyra moved instantly, raising her wrist. The blue energy pulse shot from her device, striking the drone in midair. It exploded, sending sparks across the room. Before Ethan could process what just happened, the front door was kicked open. Two tall, armored figures stormed inside. Their bodies were covered in sleek black plating, their helmets smooth and featureless except for the single glowing red visor running across their faces. They weren't human. Zyra's voice was sharp with fear. "Draxian hunters." One of the invaders raised a weapon, a sleek rifle glowing with an eerie blue light. Ethan didn't think. He grabbed Zyra and pulled her down just as the weapon fired. A blast of energy struck the wall behind them, blowing apart wood and sending flames flickering to life. Zyra moved fast, pressing a sequence on her wrist device. Her suit shifted, glowing with an electric blue energy field. "We must leave," she hissed. Ethan nodded. "Back door. Go." They sprinted toward the rear exit, dodging another energy blast. Ethan grabbed his shotgun from the wall, his only real weapon, and fired at the nearest Draxian. The shot barely slowed the alien down. The armor absorbed the impact, but the force made the hunter stumble backward. Zyra activated another pulse weapon, hitting the second Draxian directly. This time, the blast worked. The invader crashed into the dining table, knocking it over in a loud clatter. Ethan and Zyra burst through the back door, racing into the woods. Behind them, the Draxians recovered quickly. The leader raised his communicator. "Targets escaping. Initiate pursuit." A mechanical whine filled the air. More drones flew out of the sky, their red lights cutting through the darkness like glowing knives. Ethan and Zyra ran for their lives. The escape plan. Branches whipped past as they ran through the dense forest. Ethan's heart pounded, his breath ragged. Behind them, the Draxians closed in fast. Zyra suddenly stopped, pressing something on her wrist device. "I have a failsafe," she said. "A distress beacon. But it will take time to charge." Ethan gritted his teeth. "How much time?" 5 minutes. They didn't have 5 minutes. Then Ethan spotted something ahead. A ravine, steep and deep, cutting across the landscape like a scar. A narrow rope bridge stretched across it. Old, unstable, dangerous. But it was their only chance. Ethan grabbed Zyra's arm. "Come on." They dashed toward the bridge, the wood creaking under their weight. Behind them, the Draxians opened fire. Energy blasts tore through the trees, missing them by inches. As soon as they reached the middle of the bridge, Ethan spun around and fired his shotgun at the ropes. The first shot snapped one of the support lines. The bridge lurched dangerously. Zyra's eyes widened. "What are you?" "Trust me," Ethan shouted. He fired again. The second support snapped, and the bridge collapsed beneath them. Zyra grabbed Ethan, her wrist device flaring with a sudden energy field. Instead of falling, they floated for just a second, enough for them to land on the opposite cliffside. The bridge crashed into the ravine below. The Draxians skidded to a halt, unable to cross. Zyra gripped Ethan's hand tightly, her breath unsteady. She looked at him, golden eyes filled with something new, something Ethan couldn't quite define. "You trusted me," she murmured. Ethan let out a shaky laugh. "Yeah, well, looks like you can fly." She exhaled sharply. "Barely." Then her wrist device beeped. The distress beacon was active. Far above them, something stirred in the night sky. A new ship, sleek and silver, descending fast. Ethan looked up. "Friends of yours?" Zyra's lips curved slightly. "Yes, and they will not be pleased." Ethan smirked. "Well, neither am I. Those Draxian bastards blew up my cabin." Zyra's eyes gleamed. "Then perhaps it is time for humanity to fight back." Captured. The dark side of alien science. Ethan stood on the rocky cliffside, his pulse still racing. Behind him, the collapsed bridge hung in tangled ruin, preventing the Draxians from crossing. Ahead, Zyra's rescue ship descended from the sky, its sleek silver hull glowing in the moonlight. For a moment, relief surged through him. Then everything went wrong. A high-pitched whine cut through the night, followed by a blast of blue energy. Before Ethan could react, a glowing net wrapped around him, electrifying his body. His muscles locked up instantly, pain shooting through every nerve. Zyra's golden eyes widened in horror. "Ethan!" She lunged toward him, but another blast struck her in the chest. She screamed, collapsing to her knees. The Draxians had a second team waiting in the trees, hidden, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Ethan's vision blurred as his body went numb. He saw the Draxian soldiers closing in, their red visors gleaming like predatory eyes. The last thing he heard before darkness swallowed him was Zyra's panicked voice, calling his name. Ethan wakes up, in an alien lab. Ethan woke to the sensation of cold metal against his skin. His body ached, his mind sluggish. Bright white lights burned into his eyes as he slowly forced them open. He was inside a sterile, futuristic lab, walls lined with alien machines, blinking lights, strange floating screens. He tried to move, but his arms were strapped to a metallic examination table. Thick, metallic restraints locked around his wrists and ankles. "Shit," he muttered. Then he saw Zyra, strapped to another table beside him. Her body twitched slightly, her metallic blue skin covered in faint energy burns. Her suit had been partially removed, exposing the glowing bioluminescent lines running down her arms. Ethan's stomach twisted. They were in a Draxian science vessel. A low, mechanical growl filled the air. Ethan turned his head and saw the Draxian commander. The alien was massive, at least 7 feet tall, with a muscular reptilian body covered in black armored scales. His face was hidden behind a featureless mask, only the thin, glowing red visor visible. When he spoke, his voice was cold and sharp, like a knife against stone. "Human." Ethan glared. "Oh great, you speak English. That's gonna save us a lot of awkward hand gestures." The commander ignored him, turning toward Zira instead. Valeri scientist Zira 5. Your mission ends here. Zira's eyes flickered open. She groaned, her body straining against the restraints. You don't understand, she gasped. I am trying to save my people. The commander's visored gaze didn't waver. The Valeri's time is over. Ethan's blood ran cold. The truth about the Draxians. The Draxian commander paced slowly around them, his armored boots clicking against the metal floor. You humans think you are at the center of the universe, he said, but you are nothing more than a dangerous anomaly. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Oh yeah. What did we ever do to you? The commander turned toward him. Your kind is unpredictable, he said. Chaotic. You were meant to be primitive, yet you defy the natural order. You adapt, you thrive, you conquer. Ethan smirked, despite the situation. You say that like it's a bad thing. The commander growled lowly. It is. He gestured toward Zira. The Valeri once had control over their fate, but now they seek to restore what was lost. By studying your kind, they believe human reproduction holds the key to their survival. He stepped closer. But we know the truth. If the Valeri learn to reproduce again, they will regain their power. And power breeds war. Ethan felt a chill crawl down his spine. The Draxians weren't just after Zira. They wanted to make sure the Valeri never rose again. Zira shook her head weakly. You're wrong. We seek harmony, not war. The commander's lips curled in a sneer. A lie. The galaxy is balanced as it is. The weak fade. The strong remain. That is the law of nature. He turned back to Ethan. And humanity. You are the greatest threat of all. Ethan forced a grin. Well, I do love a good underdog story. The commander ignored him, pressing a button on his wrist. A large mechanical device descended from the ceiling, glowing, humming with sinister energy. We will extract the data we need, the commander said. Then we will erase all trace of this experiment. Ethan felt ice crawl through his veins. They weren't just going to kill him. They were going to wipe out everything Zira had learned. He gritted his teeth. No, not like this. Escape plan. Desperate and dangerous. As the machine powered up, Zira suddenly spoke in Valeri, her voice sharp and urgent. Ethan frowned. English, please. She locked eyes with him. The restraints have energy locks. My wrist device can overload them. But I need time. Ethan's heart pounded. How much time? Zira's golden eyes gleamed. 30 seconds. Ethan grinned. I'll give you a distraction. Before the Draxian commander could react, Ethan yanked his wrist upward with all his strength. The metal restraint creaked but held firm. But that wasn't the real plan. The real plan was what he did next. He turned his head to the side and bit down, hard, on his own lip. Blood filled his mouth. Then he spat it directly into the commander's visor. The red liquid splattered across the alien's face, blinding him for half a second. Ethan didn't hesitate. He yanked again, this time slamming his entire body sideways. The restraint cracked under the force. The commander stumbled backward, roaring in fury. At the same time, Zira's wrist device flared with electric blue energy. Her restraints snapped open instantly. She lunged off the table and grabbed a Draxian energy rifle from a nearby rack. Before the guards could react, she fired. Boom! The nearest Draxian was blown backward, crashing against the metal wall. Alarms blared throughout the ship. Ethan tore off his last restraint, rolling off the table just as Zira tossed him a weapon. He caught it. The Draxian commander snarled, wiping the blood from his visor. Kill them both. Zira's voice was ice cold. No, she said. We're leaving. She grabbed Ethan's arm. Run. Humanity steps in and shows why we're the best. Alarms blared. The Draxian warship shook with the force of battle as red emergency lights bathed the metallic corridors in a blood-like glow. Ethan and Zira ran, their boots pounding against the cold metal floor. Sirens screamed, and the scent of ozone and burning circuits filled the air. Ethan gripped the alien energy rifle Zira had given him, feeling the warmth of its charge pulsing beneath his fingers. He had no idea how the weapon worked, but if there was one thing he knew about guns, it was point and shoot. Zira, moving far more gracefully, led the way. She had her own rifle, held steady, scanning every corner as they sprinted through the labyrinthine corridors of the Draxian vessel. "They'll have secured the hangar," she said sharply. Ethan swore under his breath. "Great. So how the hell do we get out of here?" Zira's golden eyes flickered with calculation. "We don't need the hangar. We need the communications bay." Ethan frowned. "Why?" Zira turned, firing a precise shot at a Draxian soldier rounding the corner. The alien grunted as the blast sent him crashing into the wall. Zira didn't even slow down. "If I can access their relay," she continued, "I can send a distress signal to Earth's military." Ethan nearly tripped. "Earth's military? You want to call in the cavalry?" he asked. Zira's expression was grim. "It is the only way to survive." Ethan let out a breath. "Well, shit. Guess we're making first contact a little early." A battle in the corridors. The Draxians were fast. They were also pissed off. As Ethan and Zira pushed through the warship's interior, soldiers poured in from every corridor. Gunfire erupted, blue energy bolts flashing through the air. Ethan dived behind a crate, barely dodging a shot. "Suppressing fire," Zira ordered, already firing back with deadly accuracy. Ethan popped up and pulled the trigger. His shot went wild. Zira gave him a flat look. Ethan groaned. "Okay, so I didn't go to alien military school." She grabbed his wrist and adjusted his aim slightly. "Compensate for the recoil." Ethan nodded and fired again. This time, he hit a Draxian square in the chest. The alien stumbled, falling back. Ethan grinned. "Hell yeah." Zira didn't respond. She was already moving, grabbing him by the wrist. "Come on." They sprinted down another corridor, turning sharply as an explosion rocked the ship. The Draxian commander returns. The doors to the communications bay slid open. Zira rushed inside, immediately moving toward the control panel. Her fingers danced over the alien console, bringing up complex data displays. Ethan kept his rifle raised, scanning the corridor outside. Then, he heard it. Heavy, measured footsteps. The Draxian commander emerged from the shadows, his black armor gleaming, his red visor burning like fire. He moved with calm, deliberate steps, holding an impossibly large energy weapon at his side. Ethan tensed. "Zira, we have a problem." She didn't look up. "Buy me time." Ethan gulped. "Right. Sure. No problem." The Draxian commander stopped a few feet away. He didn't raise his weapon. Instead, his voice came low and cold. "Surrender, human." Ethan let out a short laugh. "Yeah, that's not happening." The commander tilted his head. "You are protecting something you do not understand." Ethan kept his rifle steady. "You think I don't get it? You're scared. You don't want Zira's people to regain what they lost. You don't want humans interfering." The commander's voice darkened. "Humanity is a disease. Your kind spreads, reckless, unstoppable. You conquer, you consume. If the Velari adopt your ways, they will become like you." Ethan clenched his jaw. "Yeah, maybe that's not a bad thing." The commander lunged forward, faster than Ethan expected. Ethan barely had time to dodge before the commander slammed his fist into the console behind him. Sparks exploded as Zira jerked away, narrowly avoiding the impact. The distress signal had been sent, but the console was now destroyed. Zira turned sharply. "Ethan, move." The commander swung his arm toward Ethan, But Ethan had already raised his rifle. Boom! The shot hit the commander directly in the chest. The impact sent him skidding back, smoke rising from his armor. But he didn't fall. Instead, he grinned beneath his mask. "You fight well, human." He raised his weapon. Then the entire ship shuddered violently. A voice boomed over the intercom. "Unidentified warship, this is the United Earth Defense Fleet. Lower your shields and stand down immediately." Ethan blinked. "Wait, did we just?" Zira exhaled. They heard the signal. Ethan grinned. Humanity had arrived. The sky burns. The next few minutes were chaos. Through the ship's damaged viewport, Ethan saw massive warships descending from the atmosphere. Sleek, powerful vessels bearing the blue and white insignia of Earth's military. They weren't alone. Another fleet was approaching. The Vaylari, Zyra's people. Her distress beacon had reached them too. The Draxian warship shook violently as Earth's ships opened fire. Ethan grabbed Zyra's hand. "We need to get off this thing. Now." She nodded, already moving. The Draxian commander snarled in rage. This is not over. But Ethan was already running for the escape pods. Humanity's strength. As their pod launched, Ethan and Zyra watched the battle unfold. The Draxians fought hard, but they were outnumbered. Human warships moved with precision, their advanced weapons tearing through enemy defenses. Earth wasn't some weak, backwater civilization anymore. Humanity had stepped onto the galactic stage, and they weren't backing down. Inside the pod, Zyra turned to Ethan. "You called for them," she murmured. "You trusted them to come." Ethan met her gaze. "Of course I did." She was silent for a moment, then whispered, "Your people are remarkable." Ethan smirked. "You haven't seen anything yet." Above them, the Draxians fled. The battle was over. Humanity had won, and Zyra's people had a chance at a future. The final lesson, more than just science, the battle was over. The Draxians had fled. The warship they had been imprisoned on was now nothing more than floating debris, drifting above Earth's orbit. The United Earth Defense Fleet stood victorious alongside the newly arrived Vaylari vessels, marking a historic moment. First official contact between humans and Zyra's people. But for Ethan, none of that mattered right now. Right now, he was just trying to catch his damn breath. Inside the escape pod, he slumped back against the cold metal wall, wiping sweat and blood from his forehead. Across from him, Zyra sat perfectly still, her glowing golden eyes locked on him. They had survived. They had won. But something about Zyra's expression told him this wasn't over yet. The pod trembled slightly as it was pulled into the docking bay of a Vaylari mothership, a sleek and elegant vessel hovering above Earth's upper atmosphere. The doors hissed open, revealing a delegation of Vaylari scientists and leaders waiting for them. Ethan glanced at Zyra. She didn't move right away. For the first time since meeting her, she looked uncertain. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know what happens next." Ethan smirked. "That makes two of us." She turned to face him fully. "I was sent to study human reproduction, to understand how your kind connects, bonds, and creates new life. But I have learned something I did not expect." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" Her voice was soft, almost vulnerable. "That it is not the science that matters. It is the experience." Ethan swallowed. There was something different in her gaze now. It wasn't just scientific curiosity anymore. It was something deeper. Something human. But before he could respond, the Vaylari delegation stepped forward. A tall, elderly Vaylari man with deep silver eyes and long flowing robes approached. He regarded Zyra with a calm yet serious expression. "Zyra 5, he said, his voice smooth and commanding. "You have done well." She straightened slightly, but Ethan could see the hesitation in her posture. "I have retrieved the data," she said, her voice more formal now. "But there is more to understand." The elder studied her carefully. "Explain." Zira took a slow breath. Human reproduction is not merely a biological process. It is tied to emotions, experiences, and connections that shape their very existence. If we wish to restore what was lost, we cannot rely on science alone. Ethan could see whispers and glances exchanged among the Valari leaders. Some looked intrigued, others concerned. One of them, a woman with sharp metallic blue features, spoke up. "That is not our way, Zira 5. Zira turned to her. "Then perhaps our way must change." The room fell silent. Ethan realized in that moment, this was bigger than just their survival. This was about an entire species standing at a crossroads. Zira had seen the truth. If the Valari truly wished to reclaim their ability to reproduce, they couldn't simply copy human biology. They had to embrace what made humanity so unique. Love, passion, choice, the willingness to take risks, to connect. And the Valari weren't ready for that. Not yet. A new path forward. After the tense meeting, Ethan and Zira were escorted to a private chamber aboard the Valari mothership. The room was simple yet elegant, illuminated by soft blue lights, with a clear window overlooking Earth. Zira stood by the window, her arms crossed, lost in thought. Ethan stepped beside her. "You okay?" She exhaled. "My people fear change. They believe logic and order are the only paths to survival. But I have seen more in my time with you than I ever expected." She turned to him. "You taught me more than I was sent to learn." Ethan gave a small grin. "Yeah, guess I'm a pretty good teacher." She didn't smile back. Instead, she reached out, taking his hand. Her touch was cool, yet warm beneath the surface, her fingers light against his skin. "This experiment," she whispered. Was it truly just an experiment? Ethan felt his heart skip a beat. He could see it now. This wasn't just about science anymore. What they had been through. Asterisk, asterisk, the shared meals, the trust, the battles, the sacrifices. Asterisk, asterisk, it had changed something. Not just in Zira. In him too. He squeezed her hand gently. "I don't think it was." She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded, as if confirming something to herself. "I must return to my people," she said. "They will need time to understand. But I am uncertain of what comes next." Ethan swallowed. "Well, you did say the human way was unpredictable." Her lips curved just slightly. "Yes, and that is why it intrigues me." She stepped back, pressing a hand to her wrist device. A small holographic sphere materialized in front of Ethan. "A communicator," she explained. "When the time is right, I will call." Ethan took it, feeling the weight of something unspoken between them. Then, with one last glance, Zira turned and walked toward the waiting Valari officers. Ethan watched her go, feeling an odd tightness in his chest. For the first time in his life, he had no idea what the future held. But somehow, that didn't scare him. It excited him. Epilogue. The beginning of something more. Back on Earth, Ethan stood on the balcony of a high-tech space research facility, staring up at the stars. It had been 3 months since the battle. The world had changed. First contact with the Valari had been kept secret for now, but the higher-ups in Earth's government knew the truth. Talks had begun. Agreements were being discussed. And as for Ethan, he was still adjusting. Some days, he wondered if he had dreamed the whole thing. But then, one night, as he sat alone, staring at the sky, the communicator on his wrist lit up. A soft, familiar voice spoke. "Ethan, are you there?" His heart pounded. He exhaled sharply, a slow grin spreading across his face. Pressing the device, he answered, "Yeah, I'm here." The stars above shimmered, and somewhere, out in the vast galaxy, Zira was waiting.